mean, I think like most people, it just starts out from going to gigs and like falling in love with that, right? And you don't think it's ever going to be a career. You're just like, I like going to gigs, I like going to parties. I should start putting on parties. And then a few years later, like, well, this is like turning to more than just a hobby, you know. But the short version, the very short version is, yeah, got fake ID very early, was going to gigs, festivals, clubs from early, was running parties from the age of 18, worked in a record store, a hip hop record store called Deal Real, where I was like meant to be at art school and I was working there full time. And that was sort of where I met so many people. And not long after that, Plastic People, I think, was very formative for me. And then sort of got more serious into the organising parties. When Deal Real ended and I was no longer a student, there was a gap for where we all used to hang out. So I started this party, Living Proof. When hip hop had a bit of a rejuvenation in 2012 with Kendrick coming out and A$AP Rocky and Danny Brown, we were like the go-to party. So we did A$AP Rocky's first European show, we did Danny Brown's first European show. Almost dream come true, almost got Kendrick, and I still hope one day I get to work with him.
So if you ain't a true nigga, racks will go to nothing. I'll be on that nothing.
And in the meanwhile, I was working at Bleep. So I had this like hip hop persona, and then I had this Bleep sister company of Warp. I had this kind of electronic persona. It was a really good place to work, to see how the actual proper industry worked. Like, this is how a label works, this is how publishing works, this is how retail works. And they let me sort of spread my wings a bit, and they let me set up a record label, which I ran for them. They were both kind of running in tandem, and then Living Proof was doing so well, I was like, wow, just like running this party and DJing is paying me more than a full-time job. So I was like, right, I'm gonna leave my job and I'm gonna be my own boss. I'm never going back to that. And then within a few months, I got asked whether I wanted to be the head of music at Boiler Room. And they were like, you'll travel the world and do cool stuff all around the world. I'm like, I could go back to full-time employment for that.
Real vinyl, real skipping, real jumping, real power cut. Ladies and gentlemen, Forte!
So a few years later, I left Boiler Room as it got bigger, kind of been known as this sort of like, I don't know, like freelancey, floating person who does stuff. Now it's a really interesting period of my career, because having done so much on like retail, clubs, events, managing, DJing, I've been on NTS, I even forgot that, like being on NTS since day one, so 13 years. That's a big part of my journey. I'd love the day where I just sat and made tunes, but we all sit and do emails and do calls, and it could be anything. Like, it's not necessarily music, it's just organizational things. I mean, it's music related, but it could be any job, but actually feeling very close and connected to music is a really interesting sort of journey of the last few years, I would say. So yeah, where we're going to is my studio, which is about a 10-minute drive away. It's perfect for me just to have a little getaway, to have a space to make music, you know. And it allows me try and do less of it these days as a dad, but I have a very understanding wife, and when Kieran's in nursery, it allows me to pull an all-nighter, which by nature, from being a DJ in nightclubs, I'm definitely more nocturnal in nature, and having a space where I could be loud till whatever o'clock in the morning I want to go to has been invaluable. One thing I'm really bad at is finishing music and arranging music. And with this song, which ended up being Kieran's Bike, played it on my NTS radio show, and it was originally edit using stem separation of a Dean Blunt tune. So if I play the a cappella as well.
Another day, save it for another day.
Now, the good thing about working with an a cappella, it kind of plays into my DJ mentality of like literally back in the day with getting an instrumental and getting an a cappella, mixing them together. And it sort of forces you to make arrangement of the a cappella will guide the arrangement of the track. It's sort of a tool for me to help finish tracks. The track obviously is just loads of VSTs, and originally this piano. Oh, don't hear it. It's actually the Ableton stock grand piano with loads of filter effects on it. One thing I do a lot is, I'm going to shout out Joe Metris for teaching this, but putting an envelope follower on the dry wet of a distortion. So it's sort of like with the movement of the instrument will sort of like if you just throw distortion onto something, it can be quite overpowering, but having a bit of movement with an envelope full and the dry wet is something I use a lot. With these particular strings, I actually got the incredible Raven Bush, who I have to shout out. He's pretty much all over the record, and I just got him to replay the VST. So a lot of what I would do would give like some Ableton stock, make the sound beautiful with some incredible lush violin strings. And what's interesting about those staccato is there was no idea for staccato in the song originally, but going back to the Dean Blunt a cappella that I used Serato stem separation, but sometimes it's not that good and there's little remnants of the instrumental, and there was little bits of the Dean Blunt staccato strings that was in there that was like, actually that sounds quite good. So in a way I sampled it and got Raven to replay it, but if you listen to the Dean Blunt a cappella, you can hear all the artifacts of the staccato strings of his original song.
Day, save it for another day.
Yeah.
For another day, she will never see us.
So initially there was no strings anywhere in this at all, and I got Raven to replay the piano part and then essentially interpolated, is that the word? Hope stealing's not the word. And interpolated the from the original Dean Blunt version, and that kind of what led to be Kieran's Bike. But the most sort of like distinct part of this track is the bass lines. So it's the Ableton sub-clicky bass, which I use a lot actually. And again, using the distortion, just to give it some welly, with an envelope follower and dry wet, transient shaper to tighten it up, limiter, and then EQ, and then Sam Interface, who mixed the record, was like, you can't have a bass line on top of a bass line. And I'm like, I'm sure I've seen Dillinger say ignore all of that. If you want to do bass line on top of a bass line, you could do it. So again, bass tightener, transient, distortion with and I have EQ'd it slightly so that there's less of a low end frequency clash. And then on the group, I think I sidechained to the kick using track spacer, which I've been told actually you're not really meant to do. So I've started using Soothe. And again, envelope follower and LFO on distortion. So it's distorted bass line on distorted bass line, grouped up and distorted even more. And that's sort of the main sort of like stinky face part of Kieran's bike. It did take a while to get properly, especially with the mixing, because it is distorted bass line on distorted bass line, distorted even more. And I think the moral of the story, if someone tells you you can't do something, you just got to persevere until you make it work. Yeah, I feel like I'm sort of just at the beginning of the journey of this sort of like amalgamation of musicians and electronic, and also doing a lot of stuff on my own as well. I'm feeling the confidence to not just collaborate and work with musicians, which has been amazing, and I've really been appreciative of everyone who's given me their time on this like journey. I'm having a little bit more confidence to maybe, there's one song on the EP that's like just me, but I feel like collaboration is always going to be a part of my music making, just because I learn as I go along from other people, and it's more fun. It's really, I don't think there's anything better than making music with your friends.